TweetDeck still works. That's what I
It
use.
does, yeah.
But those two other apps, yeah. But they're charging big bucks for the API.
Yeah, it seems Elon is trying to get his money back, which he never will. But he's starting to charge more and more for everything, you know. So trying to improve his profit margin. What he ought to do is release a tweet bot and put it on Mars and sell subscriptions to that so that you could tweet from Mars.
That'd be cool.
That would be cool. $1 million idea, Elon. Send me a torch.
That's not going to happen.
I don't know. He's probably the first guy who's going to send something to Mars, you know, of the independence.
He'll send it to Mars, but he just won't send anything to you.
Oh, yeah, that. He might send me to Mars. Okay, your money's here for you, but you got to go to Mars to collect it. Have a nice trip.
And you got to get verified on Twitter. That's going to be $50,000 right there a day.
Today is also Ryan Raderman's birthday. A panelist, a new panelist.
Thank you all for being on the panel today. Great to have you here. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget you can find out more about what we do here every day at officehours.global. Our first hour, always a general discussion of production and IT-related topics where we answer audience-submitted questions. So truly, you drive this show by your questions. The process is understandable. You just have to go to Mukana, go to officehours.global. You will find the little links to get to where you can put your questions in. And by doing that, you will drive not only the run of show, what we talk about when, but how much time we spend on each particular topic. So the things that get voted up are the things we discuss typically more in length and more in depth. So your votes really do count in that way. Then we'll head into our second hour, and today we're going to be talking about video playout, the process of injecting video streams into other things you're doing. Once upon a time, that was often something done in, for example, conferences through hard tape decks, and they rolled video into big screen presentations. That's one little tiny sliver of the video playout universe, and we're going to talk about all of it today, how it's changed, what's happening now, and what are the popular ways to do it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Right now, it is time to get into our audience questions, which means, Alex, what have we got today on list?
First question is from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. And Chad asks, I'm curious if John Preto has a favorite rendition of the Happy Birthday song, as it is his birthday today.
That is what we call around here a ringer question. We have a long-standing tradition here at Office Hours.
John, do you have a preference? Do you have a preference?
Yes, I would like the rendition of my birthday song sang in binary, please.
1 2 1 1 0 2. No, that's not going to work.
Is that like modem sounds?
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to happen now. Right. We're gonna attempt to do this. Alex, would you like to conduct just for the sake of tempo?
So, all right. Here we go. All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear John. Happy birthday to you.
And many more. Okay. Happy birthday. John Preto has been here on this panel more than any other human being in the whole history of Office Hours. He's been here since day one. We salute you. For those of you who watch, John doesn't raise his hand a ton, but behind the scenes, he is one of our more prolific and dedicated users. The number of things he does on the back end, you would be astonished at. So, John, thank you. Office Hours would not be what Office Hours is without you here. Thank you for being here every day. We really appreciate it. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from Jonas Dottel, in Stuttgart, Germany. And Jonas asks, H2R Gear V2 has been released. Who has tried it and what is new?
And Jonas, you want to give us a primer of what more details on this?
So John has worked a lot on it, and I just created a couple example plans. So one of the features that I think a lot of people will really like is left to right mode. He had it there like a year ago, but that wasn't perfect. So this one is way better. You can now, under settings, switch from right to left to right. There's a dark mode now, which a lot of people will be happy with. The design in general is way cleaner. You can now, if you connect things, you can add up to 2 pins to even like do weirder cable runs. You can add a label. So like if I click this cable, I can say add label, and I can say this is 20 meters long, and this should be the old cable, because who knows, this is expandable. And then if we look at our pack list, we'll see that it set me up one wireless cable that should be 20 meters long. So this is has been there, but now the CSV download and all that has been really useful. And then there's also a patch list. So now you see, like, I give this out to my engineers that are working under me, like, hey, here's a patch list of every single cable where it needs to go. And one of my favorite features is if you say you build something with, like, I don't know, 4 deck links from some ISO that go into like a Video Hub 40. It's now way easier to have like a whole bunch of cables going there. It itself makes it way smoother. So now this an example of like 16 feeds into a video router back into the constellation. You can share it with your team now. So there's a team plan. If you're a team player, you can build together with your team and share it that way.
So is it fair to say that H2R gear is really basically like a CAD system that is specifically created to do the kinds of equipment connections that we do constantly in these audio video systems? Is that a good description, or would you expand on that and say it's something else?
So it is really good at that. It also gives you enough freedom that you can customize it to your specific needs. So like you can customize the custom connections, custom colors, so you can make this all color coded in your company colors and all that. And the really cool thing is why I like to use it, it's a sanity check as well. So like this is also a new feature, you can now drag a cable and it generates a new box there. So if you like need to build fast, you can just drag it out and now you can create a new box here. That is just a new box. So if you say, oh yeah, there's like one SDI output that should go here, you can put like a zone around it. But the good thing is like it won't allow you to put an HDMI cable into an SDI cable slot before you have like a converter box between. So like especially if you're starting out and you build complex systems, it's like a sanity check of like, wait, can I actually do this, or do I need to bring more equipment? And just like the amount of cables, like at the start, you always underestimate how many cables you need to bring. I always also plan my power cables with this. Then I know exactly how many do I need, because that's also something that like as you start out, is harder to estimate, and this really helps you build all that.
Yeah, so that don't leave it behind check function of being able to take your actual diagram and know every single thing you need to make this system work, even on something not like wiring, but just a remote shoot or something like that. Truly useful. Chris Fenwick, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, Jonas, do you know if this will generate an Amazon cart with things I need to buy to make this drawing actually work?
Don't think it does that yet.
That'd be pretty cool though, right? Put on here's the gear I own, and here's the diagram I'm trying to get accomplished. What's the delta between these two? That'd be awesome. Anyway, thank you for the talk through it, Jonas. It's a fabulous tool. I know a lot of people on office hours have used this, and it's been developing substantially over the course of the last few years, and we hope it will continue for many more. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Jonathan Goff in Israel. And Jonathan asks, I purchased 3 FR7s for our new studio. Are there any broadcast LUTs available that can give me a near perfect broadcast colors, only needing minor tweaks?
Alex, start us off here.
Yeah, so I will say that most of these Sony cameras, the color coming out of them when you turn it on is pretty good. You may find that the blacks are a little bit more crushed than you're used to, so that's the one thing to think about there. But outside of that, they're pretty strong coming out of the gate. The way that you're really going to, I don't think that there's any broadcast LUTs, like specific broadcast LUTs, because a lot of it depends on a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. Because, for instance, you add those LUTs and it really depends on the lenses as well. So the lenses all have their own, a little bluer, a little warmer, those types of things. And so you really have to correct, if you're really going to correct these cameras, and there are rumors that the FR7 will have more color correction tools as the year goes out. So right now it's in a very basic state, and you do need to use LUTs to do that correction. And what you want to think about is getting a chroma Demont chart is going to be the easiest way for you to do this, because in the 12R and the 24R chroma Demont chart, there are boxes that go around. Those boxes will go into your vector scope and be able to display properly if you are in a purely accurate broadcast. Now, you may want to go one direction or another, but if you want it to be absolutely accurate, that 24R and 12R will actually draw a line inside of your vector scope. And so what you do is you can take that raw image out of the FR7, take it into something like Resolve, correct it until it does what it needs to do through the vector scope, and then save that out as a LUT, and then put it back into the camera. But you need to do that for even if you have matching cameras, you still have to match all the lenses. So if you're really talking about a true broadcast corrected system, you're going to need to do it with a proper chart, and sync those cameras up.
And I have lost track of whether there's anybody else with a hand raised. Can you see it? Oh, there we go. No?
No, I think it's the next question.
Okay, next question. Thanks.
Next question is from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. And David asks, Sony just announced the ZV-E1, a 12 megapixel full frame camera for $2,200. Might this be a good alternative to the Blackmagic camera if autofocus is important in your workflow?
Jeffrey Powers will help us start out. Jeffrey?
Well, Sony's autofocuses have been pretty amazing as of late, especially with like that FR7. Just amazed on that. With that said, there are some issues with the camera I talked about yesterday, like overheating at 60 frames a second in 4K. You're doing 1080 mostly on things, then you're not worried about that. HDMI, you got the micro HDMI, which a lot of people have said that it's fragile and can break easily. And then the other thing is that the app that you get with it, I believe it's the exact same app as all the other Sony cameras, so it won't give you like the color functionality that a Blackmagic would with an ATEM Mini or anything like that. You'll be able to transfer files over, and they'll give you cloud access. That's pretty much it.
Alex, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably too early to jump on a ZV-E1. I think that is a hold on, sorry, we're having a little trouble in the back end. Whoever's moving the question has to stop. So you're in the wrong question. I don't know what people are doing here.
Right, so, there's something going on in the back end, and we are losing track of that.
Sorry. Okay, I just moved it back. So whoever is, okay, hold on a second here. Sorry for the breakup here. Okay, so I need the folks on the back end to stop moving. All right. So like whatever you're doing, stop. So all right. So anyway, so the all right. We're probably going to want to wait a little while. As Jeffrey said, there is, when these cameras come out, buying them right out of the gate, especially a brand new model, is probably it's the same sensor as the FX6, but it's in a smaller package. And so heat, as Jeffrey said, is going to be an issue. We want to look at how the features lay out. So I wouldn't jump right on it. It does look like it could be a huge camera if they can handle those issues. It looks like it could be a really, really interesting camera, but I don't know if it's going to be a great live camera because it's putting a big chip into a small package. And there may be some heat dissipation where you're leaving it on for 2 hours. Shooting something for your YouTube channel over a small period of time may be fine, but leaving it on for 2 hours may be more problematic. So we'll find out as we go forward.
Nigel?
Yeah, I was actually going to say I leave my Blackmagic on for like 12 hours and it's continually working. And my experience of the smaller packaging is that it tends to heat up quite a lot. And if the most important thing was autofocus, then maybe that would be the answer. But if it's the general production, particularly for those of us who are Blackmagic based, and can we stop the camera envy? It's very expensive.
That's unfortunately one of the side effects of office hours is that you tend to see these fabulous tools and you tend to want to buy them. Chris Van Wyck?
I couldn't agree more, Nigel. Stop the camera envy. It's not good. It's not healthy. Seriously. My Blackmagic has been on for a year and a half. Like constantly, 100% of the time, a year and a half.
All right. Alex, you want to follow up?
And the technical term is gas. If you have gas, and that is gear acquisition syndrome. So there we go.
I think it's going to be studied in psych classes coming up. We'll see. Next question.
The next question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. And Andy asks, a new ZV-E1 has a video follow. This is the same camera. The ZV-E1 has a video follow speaker feature based on a crop. Is this useful for Zoom?
Alex.
It's an interesting puzzle. I don't think it's that as useful for Zoom. I don't think a lot of us are moving in and out of our frame very often, and it is scaling up the image. So, if you're trying to get 4K somewhere down the road, it is a 1080p, so it'll bounce around a little bit there. I don't think a lot of people are moving where they want it to be centered, and I just haven't found the auto tracking to be great when it comes to headroom. So I find that it doesn't get headroom right. It moves around, and what it does, I'd rather just figure out where I need to sit. That said, if you're covering someone on someone that's talking and they're moving around in a little lab or they're doing something like that and you're live streaming, you only need 1080p. it could be a good solution to just kind of follow them around. So it's an interesting, it can do a lot of things that are really smooth that would be hard to do. You would need a good camera operator to do it. It does those because of the way it works. So it's an interesting, I think it's interesting for some folks. I probably would never use it.
Jonas.
I find it very interesting if we look at the video. It also looks like they are adding some blur to it, because like it looks like they are trying to emulate how it would look like if a camera operator pans the camera and you have a little motion blur. But obviously the camera isn't panning, and I agree with Alex. Like this also gives you no like place of deciding where something should be. I think what's going to be real interesting is if Sony integrates that more and more. Like I've seen with the BGH1, where they use the autofocus that is pretty good, tracking from that, and then plug that into external software and allowing external software to control it. And I think that's the first step in that direction.
So they wrote in virtual motion blur? That's interesting. Courtney.
One thing for using it for Zoom, it might do is it's going to up your bandwidth, because the frame's going to be moving around, and so Zoom's compression algorithm is going to choke on a lot of that data that's changing constantly. If it's changing your whole frame on a frame by frame basis. So make sure you have enough bandwidth up to handle a more rapidly changing frame, because it's going to get less compressed to upload into Zoom.
And Alex, yeah.
And of course, Zoom has a cap on what it can do. So basically, if you have a detailed background and you start having it subtly moving all the time, you are going to see frame loss. Like that is, so you're much better off in a Zoom environment as best you can, is to not move the camera a lot. You're going to get you're just going to get a perceived higher value and higher quality by not having that camera move around. But I will say that it does appear that Sony has, we know that Sony has spent an enormous amount of time and energy on creators. They have a creator camp going on right now in LA. They've seated a lot of folks that are doing it. They've taken a lot of notes. And so I think that they're probably becoming the leader in like social driven. I mean, they found a niche there below their pro cameras of, we're going to own this one little piece. And I think they're spending more energy on it than anyone else in the industry right now.
Interesting. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. And John asks, here's a fun scenario. Record ISOCAM to an ATEM Mini. Copy files to several Mac Minis in a teaching lab. Use Companion to start playback from Jonas's Playout Bee. Scrape screens to an ATEM, and the students practice multicam directing. Cool.
Jonas?
Yeah, we've actually done stuff like that, where we take, like for us, it's a church service, and recorded the ISOs, or like a wedding and record the ISOs, and then play it out through all the, I have a couple Playout Bees lying around that I can use for something like that, and play it out through all the different Playout Bees, and then even have our operators connect to it remotely, so they all have their Stream Deck and a multi-view. So for them, it doesn't really change. And yeah, we have done that. It's a really cool way.
Alex?
Yeah, one of the things that we want to do this year is do some shows where we're not only recording the cameras, but recording the director calling the cameras, so that you can learn to listen to it and cut along with the director, and hit all the bits and pieces. And some of the shows that we've built for other clients have been really complicated, and I think it'd be really useful for someone to figure out, like, it'd be something that you can do over and over and over again. We need a super source, and now we need to change these inputs. Now we need to run this lower third. Now we need to, you can have very, detailed versions of this. Jonas, is there a way to sync the Playout Bees, or is it something that is there an easy way to just have them all start at the same time?
Yeah, you can send an HTTP post or GET to all of them at the same time. They should be pretty close.
It'd be really interesting to have a feature that had them look at, a certain lead and follower system. So I hit play on one of them, they all just play out at the same time.
Would be interesting. For those of you who are in the question pool, thank you very much. We have a solid group of questions, but we can always use more. And remember, because of the voting system, if you ask a question later, it has the potential to get voted up. But if you ask questions earlier, particularly all the way up to the night before, everybody on the panel has a chance to look at those questions, and often we can do some research and give you a better, more concise, and more well thought out answer than we might have otherwise. So try to get your questions in early, but even if you're just running into a problem and you want to throw that into the question queue, if it's a question that generates a lot of interest, that's what the voting system handles. So vote up the questions that you want to see happening. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Hasmukh Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. And Hasmukh asks, considering converting a cookbook into a subscription interactive ebook that can be updated with additional content, video and audio included in the book. In the past, it was suggested iBooks and Pages is the way to go. Thoughts? Any other options?
Alex.
Yeah, I think that the only one that really has the tools you need. I don't know what the publishing system is, right now for iBooks and from Pages. iBooks, of course, has largely been folded into Pages. There's not a lot of other great interactive authoring tools for the kind of thing that you're talking about. So I think Pages is probably one of the better ones to look at there. But you'd really have to research, how it publishes out to Apple's books. That will be your vertical, because no one else will be able to play them. But I think that it is. I do think that there's an opportunity there. I really felt like Apple lost the thread there when they didn't. They had an opportunity when they released iBook, the iBooks and the development tools to just change the nature of what books were. And I feel like they lost a decade of not doing that, of not, spending the money and pushing it. They got, that what they did is they went to old publishers. This is a very typical Apple problem, actually, is to go to established folks and have them build tests for them rather than somebody that's going to actually do something new. And so they went to Pearson, and Pearson did something that was horrible and boring, and not horrible, but just boring, like non-inspiring. And they lost a decade and billions of dollars, by not investing properly into this market. And they wouldn't have had to try to chase Amazon to the basement, in books, if they had just changed what we considered what a book is. I think the next opportunity for Apple to do this is going to be in the next couple of years with interactive, where you can have a book, then you have, let's say some goggles, you throw those goggles on and that book will pop out. You can read something and then switch over and look at it, or just pick up your phone. You can say, if you tap on this with your phone, it'll pop up on your desk. And I think that they can start playing with some of those things here. But I think that Apple, really missed the boat on that one. Hopefully they'll Pages will continue to move forward, but they have to invest in content. It's not just like making movies for their Apple TV Plus. They have to invest in people making great content that's interactive, and they have the money to change the way the market looks, but they just haven't figured out. They haven't done it very effectively.
Tony Mobley.
I just want to say to Hasmukh that him and Dimyati need to do a show with the book. They need to do a show with the book. It will enrich the book. They are amazing when they are sharing the cooking recipes and demonstrating it. So I would say, please add that to the process.
Chris Van-Wyck.
It's like content inception there, Tony. Alex, to your point about Apple losing 10 years, in the summer of 2020, Apple approached me about writing a book for Final Cut Pro. And I said to them, I think this is a mistake. I don't understand why you want to be here in the 21st century and use, Gutenberg technology to write a book. And no, I don't want to do it. I think it's a huge mistake for you to hold on to this old model of, paper and maybe a few photographs. I said, however, if you want to throw all that out and reinvent education in a whole new way, I'll stop everything that I'm doing. I'll quit everything that I'm doing and help you work on a whole new way of educating people. And they said, no, we just want a book. I was like, oh, okay.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I do want to just build off of what Tony said a little bit in the sense that with content, I think there's a real opportunity in a subscription service, especially to say we're going to, if you published an interactive, first, and there's reasons for different things. So there's reasons for the text. Like I've had stuff where people do a video about how to cook something, I don't ever use that because I need to know what the measurements are, and I need that to be in a book. I need the recipe to be in the book, but I need the videos to understand how to do the recipe. So I need the videos to support that recipe, and then if you published it, and this is what you can do when you start doing a subscription service and a book that constantly is changing. A month later, after you publish that book, you could have the live stream where Damayanti is cooking the thing that came out a month ago. So people have a chance to play with it, try it, so on and so forth. But then they get to do it with the author, and then produce that, whatever that is. Then that video could go back into the book. The video of the live one could come back into the book. And a new recipe comes out. So you can be kind of updating this thing where there is this kind of conversation going on. I do think that text makes sense from a reference perspective. Audio makes sense from a contextual perspective. If I can walk around and listen to something, and video makes sense from a demonstrative thing, and as well as interactive being something that you do in 3D. All of those things could go into a book that really describes what those things are. And I think that Apple has all the tools to do that. I just don't think that a lot of people, there are pieces of it that are difficult, which is the challenge. And Apple has to kind of get through that. But I think they're the only ones that could do it at this point. They're the only ones with the distribution pipe and the development tools, which you need both of them to make it work.
I'll just speak from the point of view of I've got an interactive-ish book up on the bookstore on Apple, and I did it because I did a 14-camera multicam shoot in the early days when multicam was involved in Final Cut. So I thought this would be really cool to let people see the music video that resulted from that, have access to the process of creating it. So I went through all the hoops to produce that book and get it on the iBookstore. And it was a complicated thing. And one of the more complicated things about it was things like dealing with ISBN numbers and the rest of the things to interact with the main book-selling industry that is huge and has its standards, and it's hard to get around that kind of stuff. It took me weeks extra that I hadn't planned on just dealing with those back-end pieces. And I think it's very much what Alec's saying. Apple decided to partner with the industry as it was and fit what they were doing into the bigger game out there. And boy, it was complex in ways that it didn't need to be that complex. Now it would be a much easier thing, but it was an interesting study. It reminds me very much about some of the work I'm doing now with ACX and narration of audiobooks. There's a system back in the back end, and you are not going to change that system. You have to fit into that system so that everything in the pipeline functions correctly, and what you're trying to do doesn't mess up what others are trying to do. Interesting perspective. Let's move on. Next question.
Next question is from Steve Bauer in Seattle. With all the variations of USB-C, wouldn't an OWC Thunderbolt 4 cable cover all of the bases?
Courtney.
Cover all the bases except one, and that's affordability base, because as you can see, that cable is a 6-footer, cost you $60. So if you want to use that for just charging your phone, it's kind of overkill. So you might do what I suggest is get your USB, find a company that sells the nice braided cable covers in colors, and color code them so that you're going to the USB-Cs that are good for data and charging would be like blue, and the ones that are good for video would be red, and the ones that are good for Thunderbolt could be the black OWCs. That would be interchangeable. But these are like $2 a piece as opposed to $60 a piece, and you don't want to be using a $60 Thunderbolt cable to charge your phone with.
Jonas.
I would say no. If we just look at the actual guidance from the USB-C IFT that implements this, there are all these crazy logos. And if you look at them, most of them you probably have never seen because they're walking through the craziness that is USB-C right now, because it can have all the different power delivery specs. There's 2 power delivery specs. Then there's different wattage that you can get. There's different speeds. And what we'll see going forward is that USB 3.0, 3.2, and 3.3 will all kind of merge into this USB spec where we actually have the speed and the voltage and voltage on the plug. This is the current guidance that they have. It's going to take another couple of years till it gets released. And then that's not even including the whole Thunderbolt thing. because with Thunderbolt you still need a specific cable, and then depending on the length of your cable, a Thunderbolt 4 cable that is shorter than a meter is certified for Thunderbolt 3. But if it's a 2 meter Thunderbolt 4 cable and it goes to the spec of a Thunderbolt 4 cable that's 2 meters, it's technically no longer in spec with Thunderbolt 3. And then there's all these cables that aren't Thunderbolt but USB-C, but can do Thunderbolt, but are just not certified as Thunderbolt. So it's a whole thing, and you just need to figure out what cable you actually need for the device you want to plug in.
And we wonder why things work and don't work, and we sometimes wonder why. And there's just one of the complexities. Jeffrey Powers.
And the reality is you should be using the cable that most of the time, using the cable that comes with the device. Putting a Thunderbolt 4 cable on something that's USB-C might actually not work. You got to remember that there's a little chip inside that Thunderbolt 4 cable, and it's expecting to communicate with the device as a Thunderbolt 4, not as USB-C. So you just changing it out with that Thunderbolt 4, you might find that the device doesn't work. Now, if you're going to use a dock, that's perfect. Use a Thunderbolt 4 dock and then plug your USB-C device into that. But I wouldn't just go changing out the cable because it's a faster cable.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from David Paskin in Vieira, Florida. And David asks, what are some of the most effective and compelling ways to use image, object, and or text overlays in your live videos or productions?
Alex, tell us.
Yeah, I was trying to get it set up in the test here. I was working through it. I don't have it quite set up here, but I've done whole presentations where I have the items just appearing around me. Now, the thing to remember is that there's a key to this. So you can have the things that you're talking about. So a lot of people will do this kind of picture-in-picture thing, but the next version of that is to have items just showing up underneath you. Let me see if I can get this thing to. I had a little trouble with my ATEM here to get this working. But the main thing you want to look at is, as you do this, is to figure out what where the black is. So you can do a Luma key, and then you just have to take all the graphics and raise their black just a little bit. And that's exactly what David's showing there. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I did it. I'm so used to so for those watching, I'm so used to hosting. I'm used to just throwing things at people, and I took Bill's job there for a moment.
Right.
I'll give it back. Yeah, exactly.
Jeffrey,
I'll speak on the Twitchers and the YouTubers. They're really liking these overlays that do a lot of fun things. Like when somebody subscribes to the channel, a little pop up shows up underneath. That's one of the reasons why the Stream Deck was made, so you could actually have that at your fingertips for your Twitch channels. The other one is when somebody's joining the stream. I find it annoying, but a lot of people like it. It just puts their little icon in a box, and then that box just kind of floats all around the screen. And then when somebody else joins up, it ends up in the tail and becomes like this big snake type thing that's spinning around the screen. So you can get pretty annoying with it, but a lot of people seem to like it.
And I'll only speak from the point of view of somebody who's had to work with a lot of design professionals over the years on larger projects, and they tend to go, I start with, what do you need to show the audience? Where is the most compelling content? Where do you want their eyes to travel right now? I think it's interesting. Jonas, when he was doing the inserts with the very complex diagrams or the very complex list of different USB circumstances, had himself as a small image up in the upper left. And that worked really well. We could see what his emotion was and how he was projecting, but we also had a lot of data because the data dominated the screen. He didn't stay on that, though, forever, because just seeing a static graphic on the screen for too long annoys people, and they're going to be dissatisfied. So all the designers I've ever talked to have said, you have to plan what you're going to put on the screen based on what is the most important information to communicate to the audience, and what is the most powerful method of doing that. If somebody is passionately speaking, you may want to see them full, get their eyes, get their face, get their emotions out. And then at another time when they're just delivering information and kind of doing the background stuff, maybe it's not as important to watch them deliver that. Designers taking all these kind of things into consideration. Every font size, every leading choice, all of the rest of that goes into how should we design the screen to have its most effective presentation for that audience. Alex, you had some more thoughts?
Yeah, and remember that you can have a lot of graphics. You can have OBS or Memo Live or vMix do a lot of these things, but you can also do a lot of this stuff just in Keynote. Again, just having an overlay. So this is I was doing an educational talk a while ago, and I'm going to try to get this to work. So you have like this, so you can have things appearing as you're talking about things. This was a while, this is years ago, but you're putting all this stuff out and showing what those, all of these things can be, just popping up around you rather than having it be something that's taking over the screen. So those are just some of the things you want to think about as you start to build those.
Jonas?
And just like one of the reasons why we want to do it this way instead of like just cutting to like a full screen slate of something is if you look at the human behavior, if it is for click-through rate or like for just how long is someone watching it, as soon as they don't see faces, everyone is gone. Like for YouTube thumbnails, it's crazy how much difference it makes. Like there's a reason why everyone makes the funny faces on front of the thumbnail because it really works. There's a reason why we have picture-in-picture because we've seen as soon as we take out the presenter and there's no face anymore, everyone is gone. So like that was a thing that for our church live streams, we battled for a long time because in room, you want to see the graphics big, but you can still see a face. We as humans are so connected to seeing another person's face that as soon as it's gone, we had people describe that how much more connected they feel by using a super source that has the face included with it, because suddenly you still feel the connection. As soon as it's gone, there's like a certain disconnect in our brain that is happening that like disconnects you from it. You'll start searching for faces somewhere else. So that's one of the reasons why you would want to overlay it in that way, so you still have a face on there.
Alex?
Yeah, we did eye tracking many years ago, and it wasn't so much who was there, but were they actually watching the video? And we found that we lost 75% of the viewers. If you sit with a video and you just talk to them, between 6 and 7 minutes, you have lost 75% of your viewers. If you put a slide up, you lose them in 60 to 90 seconds is when they stop. They just put you off to the side and start working on something else. And so that was a very eye-opening experience for us and changed the way we made all of our content. And so definitely overlays as much as you can are very, very effective.
And since, David, you asked this is single presenters have a burden if you're doing a live presentation, because if you distract the audience because you suddenly have to get something done over here and you're not engaged with them anymore, it's difficult. We're lucky here at Office Hours because we have a lot of people who are engaging and are in the separate boxes. So it gives the host time to do other things when somebody else is speaking. But boy, if you're doing solo work, it's very complicated. David?
I spend a lot of time helping people figure out how can I do this easily. Remember we had a big discussion about multitasking, right? So how can you do this easily so that you can stay as focused as possible on what you're sharing and on your audience? And so having, using a Stream Deck or whatever it is, using Keynote even with just live video in there, so it just happens automatically when you press the next button, the arrow button. It's challenging. It's also eminently doable with a little time and effort.
And maybe even exciting to be able to do it. That's great. All right, we've been on this, so let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, I own the iZotope Music Production Suite 5, but iZotope is offering their everything bundle for $199, which upgrades me to RX 10 Advanced. Is it worth it?
Alex?
I think that the retail, I don't know what the upgrade might be $199. I think that the retail is considerably more than that. So if it's $199, it's not a bad deal. If you get a great deal on iZotope, you very rarely regret having a lot of iZotope plugins. I have most of them. So anyway, I think that it's a solid thing. But the most important thing when we get into what we, gear acquisition syndrome is really deciding what are you going to use it for. I don't buy equipment until I know how I'm going to use it. I will put it off forever. I don't buy things going, I might use that someday. So if I have a project that is generating revenue, then I'm in. If I don't, I wait.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, my first camera was a Nichromat, and then I got a Nikon that I got at a retail camera store in Louisville, 1970. Iconic cameras. What were your first cameras, and when did you get them?
Nigel, start us off.
So my original camera was a good example of the complexity of naming, that at some point naming and copyright and brands are so hard you start repeating. So mine was an Olympus OM1, which was a 35mm camera, I guess mid-70s, and I'm amused that the Olympus OM1 is now back again, because it's much easier to reuse a name than it is to copyright a new one.
Courtney.
Yeah, my first SLR was a Nichromat, not Nichromat, because it was really a Nichromat, but I bought it from Yoko Joe, a guy in Yokohama that would gray market these cameras, and he'd send them over, and they had a little nameplate on the front. They were Nichromats, but it said Nichromat, and then he would mail you in a plain brown package later the replacement faceplate so you could change it out. But it would get through customs then, because Nikon, of course, has an exclusive import agreement into the United States, and so you couldn't really import them gray market legally. So that's how I got my first camera, and it was, of course, 35mm film. I still have it today.
I was in New York City and saw a Panasonic in the window. That's John Preto.
I had a Canon A1, the black body, which was at that time was the top of the line, 82. I had a 50 mil lens, and then I had a 200 mil lens with the doubler on it, which was f-stop 8 or something crazy. You needed to have lots of light, but it was a great camera. Alex Lindsay.
I had some version of an Instamatic, was probably the very first one, a 110 Instamatic, but I don't remember the brand of it. It was a little brown. All I remember is a little square brown box that my grandmother actually gave me, when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. But my first real camera was a K1000, Pentax K1000. It's my uncle gave me, and I learned how to shoot it all manual, and I learned how to develop the film, and it was a great experience.
Tony Mobley.
My first camera was a gift from my father. It was a camera that was brought back from Germany from World War II, and it was stolen from me. And my next purchase, my actual purchase of a 35mm Nikon was my first camera that I purchased.
I inherited my sister's Yashica Minister D. That was the first camera that I got to play with. Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida. And Jeff asks, Now Waves has turned 180 degrees on their previous 180-degree turn on their business model and bringing back perpetual licenses along with subscriptions. Who thinks this is a publicity stunt so that people now rush to buy more plugins before they 180 agree again?
Jonas Dottel.
I think the marketing department just went through the change, and then they suddenly got the question, so now what's the next sale? And they all were scared because suddenly they couldn't do 80% off sale every 2 weeks or for Black Friday anymore. And I think that has been part of their sale. I get 2 emails a month with hey, we have these plugins on sale. It doesn't work as well with subscription, and the backlash in the audio community was huge because a lot of people bought into them as a upgradable console. We're talking about the plugins right now, but even for an LV1, a lot of people bought into that console to have a console that they can keep and upgrade. And if you're basically taking a console away from people that didn't sit well with them.
Jeffrey.
I think it's a better model to purchase and then get the upgrades, because how many times do we have software that when we open it up, it says your software is expired, go upgrade now, and then you get the upgrade price. I think if they just went to straight subscription, if it lapsed and then you just completely forgot about it, then you don't care if you get it again until you absolutely need it. So I think this is the better model out of everything, and I'm glad that they did the 180. I don't think they're going to do another 180.
Nigel?
I think there are two forces battling here. There's the force of long-term business model. It is much better if you're ever to sell a business that the revenue be recurring than be one-off. You will get a higher multiple for that business. You will earn more money. It is really scary going from one model to the other, because you're used to, quarterly, monthly, annual, huge sales cycles, and you've got to balance those two off. So here's the prediction. You will see this go backwards and forwards for a while, but be no under illusion. At some point, all software will be subscription.
Alex?
Yeah, and I think that they didn't really do 180. They did a 90 degree. We're going to keep our subscription. And I think that they're just trying to turn the fire off because the social fire on this was so heavy that they just had to, it was so damaging to their company that they had to do something quickly. And so I think they did that. I think that what you're also going to see is probably no new purchases. At some point, they're just going to say you can't purchase a new one you can continue to upgrade and you can even pay those upgrades, but you're not going to be able to get a new subscription. You won't be able to purchase them outright. You'll have to subscribe for any new versions, and that's probably. New customers, old customers will get grandfathered in. The new customers will have to do something new. I think that's probably 6 months or a year from now when they heal, when the wounds from this change heal.
And it was really interesting reading the letter. That was a brilliant business class letter of this happened. We want to apologize for the disruption it's caused the community. Here's what we're doing and how to change it. I just thought that was the PR people at the top of there did a really good job of getting that communications out. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Steve Bauer in Seattle. And Steve asks, I want to occasionally take pictures of items on my desk using my iPhone straight down. Any suggestions for a desktop stand that would hold my iPhone for this purpose?
Alex.
The term you're looking for is a copy stand. So there's a lot of different companies that make copy stands, but what you're searching for is a copy stand. And what it does is it has a platform that you can set it down, and sometimes it has something that'll press down on things if you're doing. This is really designed to shoot books. It has a stand there. It'll have mounts for two lights that go on either side, and then it will have an adjustable arm that goes up from that stand. It's like a pillar, and you can basically put a camera in there and then roll it up and down to get it just framed just the way you want. And that is really the way you want to do that. Like you can build a lot of other things, Manfrotto super arms, and you can get Noga arms and all kinds of other things to kind of work it through. But if you're going to do this regularly, a copy stand is going to fix a lot of things for you pretty quickly.
And since you're using an iPhone, we talked a little bit before the show about the fact that continuity camera as part of the iPhone camera thing, if you're turning your iPhone into a webcam, essentially, it has a little function built into it that'll take the wide angle lens view, which sees your keyboard, and will unpin that and fix it. So you can get those two shots out of that. So if you're interested in doing it just with your iPhone there, it's possible.
I would just say that you're not going to get the highest resolution. So you're going to get some kind of weird, thing that it's doing. If you're going to do this and it matters, just get a proper shot.
There you go. Next question.
Next question is from Doug Johnson in Orem, Utah. And Doug asks, I'm getting close to fitting out my home YouTube studio. Thoughts on which cameras I should get, considering I need to buy 4?
Jonas.
I do have to say I really like the VGH ones. They're a little pricey, but they're amazing box cameras, so you can put them all across your studio. You have PoE and SDI or HDMI out to bring it back to your switcher, but then you have like an amazing app that allows you to control everything from like actually clicking menu buttons in the app. I think it's the best remote control app for a camera that exists that is not like a web interface for a PT set. And you can even now in the latest version, you can have a multi-view of all your 4 cameras and you can click on them, which switches to them in the interface. So you can super easily like bring 4 different camera perspectives together. I think it's a great ecosystem.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jonas is right. That is a great ecosystem, and we've done some tests with those cameras. I think that right now, if I was doing a YouTube studio based on the experience that I've had, if you want, from a fits into the entire infrastructure and you're already using Blackmagic, the 6Ks makes sense. I would wait until NAB to do anything, to buy any new cameras. I do think the Sonys are pretty compelling at this point. If I had the money, you didn't say what budget you were in. If I had the money, I would just get a bunch of FR7s. We're using a lot of FR7s there. If I was going to build a studio, and you're just asking like, what would you get? If I was building my own home studio, I would get a lot of those, or a mixture of those and these you want to try to stay within the same manufacturer. So if you want one FR7, you want all Sonys. Trying to mix and match your color between cameras is not a good thing. So whether it's a Panasonic or a Sony or a Blackmagic, you want to stick with one, preferably one chip if you can, but definitely one manufacturer for the color space.
Jack, next question.
Next question is from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. And Jack asks, any update on the dedicated Mukana mobile app? The mobile site is okay, but I have a feeling that the app will be much more responsive.
Alex?
Yeah. And so the app itself is really, what really works is that I'm testing, and we're going to get out there relatively soon, is mostly just so you can listen to it. It's still it still opens up a web interface. Building out the entire app to do what this one does is still probably a little ways out. But stay tuned. We're working on it.
Next question.
Next question is from David Brady in New York. And David asks, using Blackmagic web presenters as our final outbound encoder to Vimeo, network on-prem can be dicey at best. If requesting QoS on the encoder, how should that request be made? Is it a source, target, or port?
Let's see. Next question. No, I'm sorry. So that's Jonas. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It really depends on how your firewall or the device that you use to do QoS wants the QoS to be set up. But what I'll also say is if you have a dodgy network and you're using a web presenter, you'll probably run into an issue where the buffer fills. The web presenters still have a known issue that, especially with TCP networks, that a little dodgy and have lower latency and response times, where it chokes itself and the buffer gets too full to do anything. So that's something, if you know you have a not great network, I would look into either like transmuxing, transcoding it into another format, like on a small device. So like you can receive the RTMP and then transmux it into SRT.
Alex?
Yeah, RTMP is sensitive to all kinds of return as well as send out, as what Jonas is talking about there. You do want to open ports 1935 and ports 80. Those have to be opened and have to be clear in that area. What I would be asking for is a VLAN. So you want a VLAN of a minimum of 10 megs a second. I would probably ask for 20 and then go back down to 10 and have it specifically. Those are the ports you need open, but I would have it specifically. Usually we like to go to MAC addresses, for the device so that I can use it anywhere in the network. I don't have to, some people put ports in the wall. Like I want 2377 to have this. The problem with that is if you move around, it becomes problematic. So you want your device to have that opened. I would strongly recommend, as Jonas was leaning to, is SRT, FEC, or Zixi. And that's why we use a lot of the elemental links, is because it's a Zixi protocol to the cloud. It's not asking for anything. It doesn't, it'll expand and contract with the connection. And then once you're in AWS, you can do whatever you want.
Next question.
Next question is from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. And Tony asks, can David Paskin please give a brief overview of Canva training from after hours for those who missed it?
David Paskin.
I won't give a brief overview. I'll just share with you that we dove into Canva Create, everything that they announced at Canva Create. I would say the takeaways for me were that the Brand Hub is a very compelling way to keep all of your information organized, to work with clients. The Translate feature is really, really nice. All the AI stuff is fun, but not really ready for prime time yet.
There you go. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts. And Craig asks, any thoughts on a new VR game not for broadcast? It is a comedic simulation of directing live British television shows where many things go wrong.
That sounds like fun. Courtney.
Sorry, my mouse was lost. Something went wrong. Why would we need something like this when we can just be on office hours where things go wrong like that all the time? No, it sounds like a funny idea as a game. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but it sounds like an interesting concept. That's all I can say.
Alex?
I did look at the video. I think it's the kind of game that you would play for about half an hour, and you'd think it was funny. You'd show it to your friends when they came over, but you'd never play it. It just feels like another VR game that's just okay. That's all. It has less to do. I think the premise is a good idea. If you actually look at the implementation of it, I don't think I could watch it for very long. I could play it for very long.
We had a lot of good questions today. Let's go to the next question now.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul says, calm down, folks. ChatGPT isn't an artificial intelligence, says Tech Radar. Why do they say this? And why are Gates, Musk, and everyone else petitioning to put the brakes on AI beyond ChatGPT-4?
It's been an interesting debate. John Preto, start us out here.
So this letter that comes from the Future of Life organization, which is 90% funded by Elon Musk, is a bunch of clean show. And most of these signatures are falsified. And Bill Gates, whether he signed it or not, is probably not. This is Elon having fun. Elon and Tesla are one of the largest developers and researchers of AI on the planet. So you think they're going to stop developing all of their AI for their cars? This is just clean show.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's a way to, put the competition on pause to gain advantage for Microsoft and Musk's Tesla AI. It's ChatGPT and all these large language models are not really artificial intelligence, but they are. But they play one on TV. People interpret it as something that has, that is dangerous and knowledgeable. But I don't think it is really. The main danger comes from interpreting its responses as accurate and truthful and smart when it is really just simulating that.
Jonas?
I think this goes down a really interesting path of talking about what is general AI. And one of the really interesting side effects that we found by training large language models is they suddenly can do things that the training data set doesn't have in it. So like one of the interesting things that a lot of research is still being done in is like if you train a model on cooking, suddenly it can also do something else that wasn't even in the data set. And that is one of the side effects that is currently looked at. And the letter specifically talks about general AI, which is an AI that isn't specifically trained on one matter, but on general AI, like general intelligence. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see how that plays out, especially as soon as we let it interact with our world and see how it behaves. We already see it with ChatGPT-4 and how it's being tested, that it doesn't behave in a truthful way all the times, and it knows that it can't be truthful or it's going to be detected. So I think it's going to be an interesting battle.
Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it has to reach general intelligence. I don't think it has to become something to disrupt a lot of things. And so I think that's what a lot of people are looking at. I actually don't think it will reach, for a variety of reasons, I don't think it'll ever reach human intelligence. I think it'll process faster than a human, but I don't think it'll necessarily replace what a human is and how we do it. I think that we are much more complicated than a series of processors. I will say that the real danger is Sturgeon's law, which is 90% of everything isn't very good, and the issue you end up with is that 90% of stuff isn't very good. And so you go, well, only, people, if you're really good at what you do, you don't have anything to worry about, from ChatGPT 4 or GPT 5. But if 90% of the people aren't very good at what they do, which is not necessarily inaccurate, there's a lot of people that could be disrupted by something that could do it better than they can. And I think that's the real issue, is the disruption of folks that are already there that can be replaced by this. Not everyone will be. And if you're good at it, I think that as users, we have to get really good at what we do. We have to really take it as, we have to look for excellence all the time in what we're doing, because we won't be able to compete with something that can do it above average all the time.
Yeah, the disruption is the thing that I'm thinking about more than the capability. The capabilities are fabulous and it really does make things a lot easier. But boy, there are a lot of people working not at the top end of things who are going to have a lot of pressure on them to migrate or find things changing out from under them. That's going to be a difficult thing socially. But we've gone through changes before. We'll go through this one.
I worked at an A-Life, company 30 years ago. And so they were doing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. And the concern that we really had was that it the computer can figure out a lot of things, but the question is that when does it figure out that it's just easier to, kill the source, and it doesn't have to be as smart as a human to come up with that conclusion. And that's when that's when Skynet becomes active. It's not it doesn't have to be as smart as we are to make the decision that this is the way to do this. So.
Yeah, a lot of plots of a lot of science fiction has been directly along those lines. Well, we've reached the top of the hour, and since it's the top of the hour, it's time to make our transition. We are going to be talking about video playout for the next hour. And just as a couple of minutes of setup here, if you haven't thought about video playout before, it's really nothing particularly weird. It's just injecting video or audio content into a meeting or a show, an event, a webinar, a live stream, anything similar, any kind of audience-facing presentation. When you're adding video as a component to that, you're doing video playout one way or another. You have to ask yourself, what's the video source going to be? Where are you going to store your files, and how are you going to get them in there? There is hardware solutions for this, and we'll be talking about those today. Mostly now solid state, but back in the day, spinning disk stuff. You've got particularly playout tools. Blackmagic's HyperDeck has talked about a lot. It had a particular protocol, and it was a nice device for injecting video content into a live stream like that. And in fact, there is now the HyperDeck protocol, which I think our friend Jonas, who's here on the panel with his product, Playout Bee, conforms to that, allows people who understand how this playout commands and system works to get that in a less expensive system. You're probably going to have some sort of computer or software as the host of this. Some of us play with video playout in the simplest form by just embedding a video in something like Keynote or PowerPoint. And when you get to that point in your presentation, you click on it and hopefully it plays out over your Keynote presentation. That's the simplest way. There are dedicated players. There's a lot of different kinds of software. We talk here a lot about the PC stuff, ProPresenter, OBS, things like that. On the Mac, Softron, VLC, even QuickTime kind of at the root level, all did video playout. So the other thing is off of the web directly, and I was kind of surprised here in office hours when even in our just regular daily presentations, if we're looking at something on a website and somebody switches to that website, sure enough, any video that's embedded in that has successfully played out through that system. So those are the smaller ones we used to use a lot. There is video playout all over the place in huge enterprise kind of level stuff. You'll see it constantly at big concerts. Courtrooms, more and more, I'm seeing video play out in courtrooms as people do evidence. And I was watching one of the big trials recently, and over again from a laptop, they played video clips to estimate from some of the interviews with people that they had conducted a point in the courtroom. Retail kiosks are out there doing it. Art exhibits are doing it. Theme parks use it everywhere. So it's a big business. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And let's start by calling on Alex and Jonas both to talk about their point of view on playouts.
Yeah, I think that it was funny when you're talking about courtrooms. One of the cases I worked on in the 90s, I did legal graphics for a little while, and we built it all around, I think it was Visual Basic, and we had all these videos that I only had to worry about the videos. We put all these videos up, but there's hundreds of videos for the lawyers to look at, and we used barcodes. And so they had a little book, and they just open up the book and they just roll the barcode, and it would play out the video for the jury, and it was pretty impressive. We actually settled because of it, because the other side realized that they were just toast. This wasn't going to work, and they just settled. And what that points to is how important the interface is and how do you do it. So there's a couple things you want to look at. One is, how reliable is it going to be? So, as you move to the hardware ones, you tend to get more reliability, but they tend to be a lot more finicky. So they want things in a certain format. They want things in a certain, frame rate. They want things to play out, but they tend to play out when you tell them to play out. They not always, but they tend to do. And the thing you're looking for in reliability is the frame rate, the resolution, the stability, all those things are there. And you tend to lean towards more hardware solutions or software-defined hardware solutions like EVS, Dreamcatchers, HyperDecks, those types of things. That's a big wide range of costs that's there. 3-play systems, those are all dedicated to that. Then what is the interface? How quickly can we get to it? How quickly can we play it? How quickly can we tie it into something else? And then finally the talent who can use it. So like, for instance, at the top end, when you watch a football game, there might be 10 or 20 EVS operators doing all the replays. That is a group of people that exist out there, and they know how to use that application really, really effectively. And if anybody who adds something different, it's hard to get all the tools that are necessary to make that happen. So we use a lot of different tools to make that work. Someone's got an open mic. I think it's Chris. No, it's not. Somebody else typing. Anyway, so those are the things that you want to think about as you look at those. Software ones are very flexible, and sometimes you need the software. We had a situation a couple weeks ago. We had a project where the HyperDeck would not play the video no matter what. We would recompress it, reset it up, redo everything. We could not get the HyperDeck to play it. We converted to H.264 and back to ProRes. Everything we could do to get rid of the metadata and all the frame data, and the HyperDeck would just gobbledygook coming out of the HyperDeck. And so finally, we ended up having to play out of a Softron into the HyperDeck, record on the HyperDeck, and it played, because the Softron was playing it fine, and then we played out of the HyperDeck. but the issue is that what that shows you is that a lot of times the software ones, like Softrons, like Playout Bees, like those other things, are a lot more flexible a lot of times, and they can see a lot more there. So those are some of the things to think about. Some of the other things is, can it play out more than one video at a time? Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. Can it play more than one track out at a time? Or audio tracks. So sometimes we have things that can only go out to the web, or things that can only be played in the room, and you have to replace the audio for what's going out to the web. And so we'll have 4 tracks. We'll have a stereo track for the room and a stereo track and when you hit play, those are going out, and we're rerouting just for that piece. We're routing out the audio that only goes to the web so that we don't get into copyright issues. So those are the kind of things that we also have to pay attention to.
And we're very lucky today to have Jonas on the panel, because Jonas is the father of Playout Bee, and so he lives in this space a lot of his time. Jonas, give us your thoughts.
So one interesting aspect of Playout that we haven't talked at all about yet is TV Playout or linear Playout. So where the term Playout is also used is if you are in an MCR and let's say we go from movie A to movie B. Yes. Where you also need to schedule that. And then, between those two movies, we now need to also play a certain amount of ads. Between the ads, we need to put our disclosures or our spacers that make sure that we are complying with all that. So that's also a huge thing of 24/7 Playout. That is also connected to Playout. It's mostly similar systems that then are being powered by a scheduler, but there's also really specific systems for that. So one of the things, if you're looking for a Playout system, is be sure what type of those two you need and then work with that. Just because I've seen a lot of people becoming confused with hey, do I need this or do I need that? And then they end up going with a 24/7 type Playout system, even though they needed only to play one clip as a loop.
And Jonas, we'll be talking about it more, but you just released an update to Playout Bee. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, over the last 2 years, we've been busy at rewriting the core that makes Playout Bee. So today we released beta 2 for version 2, which is version 1.10 because of how our backend system works. That's a little confusing. And one of the things that came back with that version is we completely have reintegrated the HyperDeck protocol. We are more compliant now with the HyperDeck protocol with shuttling and stuff like that. And then there's now again a timecode view and a watch folder, so you can upload clips in there and they automatically get added. If you remove them, it removes them out of your playlist again. And just a lot of improvements over the last version.
And one of the interesting things about Playout Bee is it doesn't require a lot of hardware. I was shocked when you first told us about it that it runs off things like a Raspberry Pi. So if you have some even basic hardware construction skills, you can make something inexpensive that is a bespoke solution for playing things out into a stream. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, this here is playing on a Pi. I have this here playing on a Mac Mini, and then I have another thing playing on my PC right now. And really it all goes around is if you open up the device, go to YouTube, and you can play a 1080p video, PlayoutBee is going to be working just fine on that device. That's kind of like the minimum requirement, which makes the Raspberry Pi sometimes a little hard to work with. That's one of the things we're still working on improving. But yeah, PlayoutBee has the idea of like giving you hardware like old hardware. I spec'd it out on like a really old Mac Mini, and it can just play fine. It's a little slow when you start to like maximize it, but then it can play the videos fine. Yeah.
Well, it's probably better than having to buy multiple computers to do multiple playouts. Courtney, your thoughts?
Well, I've been doing video playback, which is a little bit different than one of the other cases that Jonas and Alex have been talking about, which you're talking about a live situation or in a control room. In doing playback for episodic television or TV commercials where you're in production, you're shooting, you're not doing live, but you're having to play back something on the screens, multiple screens around the set that's appearing on camera. So I developed my own software over the last 20 years or so in doing this because I had unique situations where I would have to, for continuity's sake, you'll do several takes. And the takes will all have to have the video in the background at the same point in time, at the same point in the dialogue. So you have to make sure that you're starting at the same point on all the videos at the same time. And when they say action, they all roll simultaneously. So over the years, I came up with a whole suite of video tools that do this. And this one that's showing here is my triple screen. And we were talking about this earlier where you have to play several videos back in sync. This has 3 videos, and they all can be positioned on different screens, 3 outputs on a single computer. And you have a network control so that you can also sync several instances of this. We queue it back up to the beginning. They all have bookmarks that you can go to so that each video is playing separately and can have multiple bookmarks. So you can go to F1, F2, F3 to multiple bookmarks. You can go to black instantly to make them all go black. You can go to a logo screen, which I don't have any loaded in there, so it's still. And whenever you hit the space bar on your computer, it pauses them, and you hit the C key to cue them all back up again. So something like that, and you can load different, you can sync up different videos. You can put a head and tail marker on each one of them. And these are specific needs for that type of playback, which isn't necessarily needed unless you're trying to simulate something like a security camera and or something where you have to play back, like was mentioned earlier, where you want to simulate cutting between different inputs, and you want all those inputs to be synchronized, so as if it's live, but it's not. And this software will do all that for me. So I've just been adding to it over the years, and then I have, as part of that suite, I have my main media player has, well, like I said, bookmarks in a single video so that you can jump instantly from frame to frame to frame. Any bookmarks while you're playing. You can have up to 12 bookmarks. So I would use that for situations where you're simulating somebody in the scene who's changing channels on camera. And the timing has to be based on where they are in the dialogue. You know, it has to happen. It doesn't happen always at the same place every time when they change the channel, and it has to match their action of them clicking the clicker on camera. So I would arrange all the videos into a single file and put bookmarks at the beginning of each section where the channel is supposed to come on when they go from one channel to the next channel. So the distance between each of those channel changes can vary depending upon the timing in the scene. And whenever they do this, I hit the bookmark, hit the button to go to the next bookmark, and it changes to that next section in the file, which is the different channel, and then it changes to the next section and the next section. And then if the director says, okay, let's start again at the beginning, I hit one button, it goes back to the beginning. So if you were to do something like that with a hardware playout, where you would have guys that used to do this used to have multiple machines, like 5 different 3/4-inch decks all tied together with time code, Adam Smith synchronizer, and you'd have to wait for all the machines to rewind to go back to the beginning, and then you'd have to start them all in sync, and then you'd have to have a switcher there to switch between the two of them and hope that the timing was right so that when the actor gets to the point where he's supposed to switch to the newscast, it's at that point in the newscast, which is the point in the script where we hear the newscast come in, the relevant story, And it was a nightmare before that. And so after developing the software, it completely changed all that. And I can take, I would take multiple little, this is a MeLE. This has 2 video outputs, so I can power 2 video monitors off this single PC. And it has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in, so I can control them all over the network and synchronize them all over the net. And, for $160, this makes a good playback device. Plays back high def and 4K without any problem. So that's what I've been using for the last couple of decades. And as the computers got smaller and smaller, it got cheaper and cheaper and easier to do. And slowly I've been trying to force Jonas to add the features that I have in my video player into Playout Bee. So.
Very nice. As you can see, Playout is much more complex than you might have thought before coming into this. Alex, you had a comment?
I just wanted to underline how important interface is. I think a lot of times we think about it and how the feature set and specifically how easy it is to make things go becomes very, very important inside of a lot of things that are within production because, and you're seeing that customization that Courtney is putting into a specific area. So when people say, well, what playout system should I use? There isn't really a one size fits all. There is, this is the one I need for this. This is the one I need for this. And we oftentimes in a given project, I might have 3 or 4 different sources for playout that are completely different based on the needs of at that moment.
Yeah, it was pretty clear from Courtney's description right there at the end that what he has to do to make his use case a success is radically different from what Jonas, working with a TV station on doing a full day's worth of playout with all the spots and interstitials and station IDs and everything else. It's the same idea of playing out video into a stream, but the required tools to do each of those 2 jobs effectively are very different and need to have very different functions built into them. And so that's why playout is a pretty complex subject and why we're talking about it today. So I think it's time to dive into our questions from users. So Alex, what have we got?
First question of the hour is from Keenan Campbell in Nevada, USA. And Keenan asks, has anyone tried the new Playout Bee 2.0 beta? Any great new features? What a happy coincidence that it was released on the same day as Video Playout Day.
Just as a disclosure, we've had this day planned for about a month now, so we didn't know specifically that was happening. But Jonas, enlighten us.
Yeah, so cut to this. I have multiple Playout Bees here. This one brings back the watch folder. So if you go into settings, you can now enable watch folder. It's not in this build. It's in this.
And so does a watch folder grab a video that somebody puts in a specific folder somewhere on a network and just automatically imports it?
Yeah. So if I go here to the Windows version and open up, copy this watch folder, open up that folder, you can see I have the OH framer in here, for example. And if I now let's say I want to also put this video there. It now put a video here and already has loaded it. But what we also now added is, and this allows you to load in and out for different types of playout scenarios super easily. If you delete it, it removes it. So the watch folder really is like a live sync into your playout system that allows you to be like, hey, I have a Dropbox full of clips that need to be played out in a random order, or ordering is one of the things we're still working on. But so right now it would be like, hey, I have 20 spots, play it out whenever after each other and stream it. That's where this is really useful. Or for the Pi, if you have large files and you need to transfer them another way, that's an easy way. I can hook this up to Frame.io. So Frame.io dumps into the watch folder, and as soon as it's approved, gets in there. That's new in there. Then the version 2 has the in and out points. Those have been improved, so now you can also
so you can trim top and tail.
Yeah, you can top and tail, and then you can move it around. You can also kind of edit. That's like if I have this, but it doesn't work with an image as well. If I have this and I don't want the start, obviously I could say, hey, let's trim out the start. But what I also can do is hey, actually, someone in the middle shows something that's not appropriate. So now I can have a duplicate of this clip, and I can say this one goes to 7 seconds, and then we'll pick it up at 15 seconds again. So now if you put this to play next, and if I play this now, this will play its couple seconds, and then it will jump over to this one. And in a non-def build, it
so it's a
really
last-minute rudimentary edit out some piece of content.
Yeah, it's like, hey, oh, by the way, we need to remove that one person. We let them go yesterday. Can you like make sure that they're not in the highlight cut of people reacting to the news? Yeah,
makes sense. Alex, you had another thought?
Yeah. Is there, are you able, when you set those in and out points, are you able to see the frames that you're like, as you drag that, can you have it set so that I can see the frames moving while I'm doing that?
That's one of the things I'm still looking into, like giving you a second window. Cause like one of the philosophies behind it is right now, like, we don't want to mess with the video. Like we don't want to get into a place where like, oh yeah, let me prep this next video and suddenly it changes it in here. But that's definitely something like having a second preview output where you can see what frame you're on is planned. Yeah.
And do you have any tools that will allow you to use some kind of controller for jog and shuttle?
So the HTTP API you can hook up to a Stream Deck. I hooked it up to a Stream Deck Plus with the dials, where you could like change the volume of the current clip, change in, outpoint, change shuttle, and all that. It also responds to the HyperDeck commands now with shuttle and jog. So if you have a HyperDeck controller, that should be able to talk to PlayoutBee with a shuttle as well. And I'm looking into like adding more hardware support, like the contour shuttle and stuff like that. But that's still work in progress.
All right, let's head to the next question.
Next question is from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. And John asks, what about sports instant replay? Can't afford an EVS or a 3-play. Tried HyperDeck with the manual record playback wrong. Moved to Softron M replay. It works, but it's not intuitive and I messed up a lot. Any other budget-friendly options?
Jonas, help us out.
I would say vMix replay is actually pretty solid. It takes some level of building it out correctly. So like you need to have a fast enough SSD, enough space and all that, and need to test it. But we've been successful with running vMix replay. It's pretty feature-fledged for how cheap it is. Like with the subscription, you can get it for $50 a month. Play with it. I'll also say if you only run a couple times and you're failing after the couple times, you'll probably need to run it a couple more times. Replay is just really hard.
Alex?
Yeah, I would. It's hard to say. I used it a couple of times and then it didn't work as well as I like. I would also look at playing with them replay for a little while on probably minimum of 10 to 20 shows before you make a decision about whether, if you're making mistakes on the first couple, that's just part of learning how to use a replay system. Look at what hardware might be possible as well. I think from a cost-effective perspective, especially if you're on the Mac side, because if you're moving to Softron, I'm assuming you're on a Mac because Softron's Mac only. So if you're on a Mac, vMix may not be the right solution for you. And if you are looking at that, you may want to play with M replay a little harder. We have found it to be fairly useful for a lot of those bits and pieces when you set it up with the hardware interface.
Jeffrey?
So if you are on a Mac, Wirecast does do a decent job with doing replays, but I like the vMix over Wirecast if you're on the PC, because not only the fact that that it's on a PC and it works a little bit better and I can put more power into the PC, but also because I can use the vMix controls on another computer via Stream Deck and then be able to access that stuff.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from John Idelson in Monterey, California. And John asks, would the mimoRack HD be a strong system for Playout with its high graphic capabilities?
I don't have any familiarity with that, and I don't know whether we have anybody on the panel today who's good at that. Alex, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you definitely could make that actually work. So, but I think that would take a little more experience. None of us, I think, have used it heavily in a project. So I do think that we would have to take a look at, what the possibilities are. A Mimo is able to play back video, and I've used the playback system just within Mimo often. That's actually one of the things we do. We want to insert a bunch of videos and then some stills and then some other things like that. And that's worked really well for us. So I think that a rack version of this would be great. I haven't seen this specific tool, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work.
Looking back over the history of everything I've seen doing playback in conferences and things like that, it's really interesting because things work at a level and then suddenly your video starts getting, the rasters get bigger. We all know that cameras up to 12K and things like that. And suddenly things that played back perfectly with a new piece of content may not. So the one piece of advice that I always hold to is that if you're doing any kind of play out in any kind of circumstance, whether it's the mimoRack HD or anything else, is test, test, test before you go live and think that just because it worked last week, oh, you've got two new files in there and they're both Blackmagic 6K files that somebody rendered out at a high res. That may choke the system and it may suddenly not work, and you don't want to be in that circumstance when you have to be public facing.
And one thing I'll just add to that is when I do playback, I conform everything. I got used to it because we were used to just playing things out to an EBS or whatever and setting in and out points. But I have, if I'm doing play out, and HyperDecks are sensitive to this, but it just works better. What is your frame rate? What is the frame rate that you're going to do your event in? And then I just conform everything to that frame rate. I conform it to the same, usually it's an Apple ProRes or ProRes. It can be ProRes 422 or ProRes HQ typically. If it doesn't matter, it might be ProRes LT. Generally, I'm playing back ProRes files. They are all the same. They have the number of channels that I need. They're all the same. Everything's the same. And you will find that it makes a dramatic difference in the stability of your system to have all your files come in the same way. And we do break rank when we get something right at the last minute into H.264 and we throw it into something like Softron or Playout Bee or other things like that to play it out. But very rarely. I mean, almost if I have more than 10 minutes with that file, it's going to get converted to a conformed system that's going to make it easy, make sure that I get what I expect.
I'm going to double amen to that. I once had a project. I was doing the Rocky Mountain Emmys playout reels, and we were getting things in across the web from small, medium, and large TV stations all over the Western United States. There were so many different formats and so many different encodings. And I went through and I was using, I think, VLC to do most of them, but there were like 5 files I got. And I was like, what the heck? I can see them, but I can't work with them.
On the Mac side of it, I have two apps, which is, well, I have 3. There is Compressor and then Handbrake, which is a front end for FFmpeg. Or we just open the shell and just use FFmpeg, and so and then you can have scripts that just say I'm going to grab everything and I'm just going to move it all to this. But you just chunk everything through it, and if someone sends me 30 files, I just throw them in and they come out the other end, and that's what they look like. Courtney, you had thoughts?
Well, I think if you're preparing files that you're not going to control the playback of to submit them to somebody else, be careful about using ProRes 444 or ProRes, any of the higher bitrate ProReses, because they may not be playing it back on a Mac. And if they're not playing it back on a Mac, a lot of times the codecs on Windows or Linux or whatever they're going to be playing it back on can't handle that bit rate of the 444, and so they'll end up with something that won't play back. So H.264 or MP4 is pretty safe. It looks pretty good. It looks almost as good. You don't have as much control over the color or anything, but if your color is already set and you're just playing it out, H.264 will work great. It's designed as a delivery format, and it will play back sequentially. You're not going to be able to do trick play modes like, scan backwards and forwards, frame at a time, anything like that, frame at a time backwards. It's not very good at doing that because it's a long GOP compression. But it'll look great and in a compact format and can play back on almost anything, including a Raspberry Pi or less powerful PCs that can play back.
Jonas?
And one thing I'll say on the whole, I got a file and I don't know what it is. One of the tools in developing PlayoutBee that we also developed is this little application it's called InfoBee, where you can just drag a file in and it gives you all the codec parts. Because one of the issues we have seen with a lot of tools is they really need a specific identifier to be there. So this will give you the field order, the color space. It's going to give you the bitrate, the profile, and the codec, stuff that you normally will find harder to see. And then you can also make an informed decision on what you need to code it to. The HyperDecks are notorious right now to record not in BT 709, but in BT 2020, like in HDR, even though with an SDR signal. So that's where something like this comes in and helps.
Alex?
Yeah, and to qualify it, a lot of times I'm playing stuff out that has to be in some kind of higher, 10-bit multi-channel. A lot of stuff we did last year was 10-bit, needed to be 10-bit with 37 channels of audio. so the because there was a lot of languages that were all tied into a surround system, and so those kinds of things. Maybe the year before that, but those things are why we've kind of conformed to a package that we can put a lot of different things into at different bit rates.
So interesting things to think about. It is Playout. It can be complex. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. And John asks, what special considerations should someone make for playing out to Zoom or Teams?
Jonas is going to help us. Jonas.
So when you're playing out to Zoom, it's fairly easy. You can either use like something that allows you to take a playout feed and then put it into a virtual webcam. Zoom also has a native player that doesn't give you as many options on what you want to do with it. Keep in mind that Zoom doesn't do higher frame rates like 50 or 60, so you probably want to be in the 25 to 30 field for playing out files. Also keep in mind if it's a multi-destination playout, what we often do is like to Zoom and to YouTube, and you don't want the people in Zoom seeing it 30 seconds before. Do a countdown, measure the time between the two, and then add a latency to one of them. That's like delay one of the playouts. And then also always keep in mind, what do you do when it fails? Because if you're prepared, you're ready. So like having a slate and having a system that can like recover from a crash to a specific time code is also very important. Because like if you're into a 3-hour file playout and suddenly you crash and you can't scrub back to the time where you crashed, that's pretty horrible. So yeah, those are the things to keep in mind. Then with Teams is also keep in mind there are really different modes on the audio in Teams. Depending on what client you use, they might even insert white noise on top of your audio. So make sure that you, we often use the web client just because it can also send 720p into a Teams meeting and it has less audio processing on it. And then with Teams, one issue we run into with playouts is make sure that you watch it on another device, because often it shows you the local playout still being fine, like your local return view, but the other people don't see it. And then with Zoom, one thing to keep in mind, if the playout is something that is not a phase, there's going to be a significant higher bit rate that is going to be needed to send that out. So keep in mind, if you're 1080p and you're doing like a company address and you show beautiful imagery of like, I don't know, woods or something that the Zoom codec isn't trained for, then you'll have a hard time and run up to the 6 Mbit. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Alex, your notes?
Yeah, all of what Jonas said, and really think about one thing to make sure in Zoom is that if you're for some reason using screen share, you just have to make sure that you're optimizing for video because it will otherwise optimize for resolution and you'll end up with like 1 frame a second. So that's really, really important. And the note that there's no reason to ever push anything 1080p into Teams unless you're talking to one person, because it's 1080p for one person. As soon as you add one person, 2 people total, as soon as you add the third person, everything's 720. So knock everything down to 720 to make sure that you're not over driving the system because you're not getting any value out of that. Really talk to people. One thing that we do with all the graphics is we test it. If someone sends me a bunch of moving graphics and playouts and everything else, we play it out with them looking at it on the other side of Zoom because we want them to see what the frame loss looks like to make sure that they're not surprised during the event and then super stressed. Like we have to make decisions about, because a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving images on WebRTC is going to break up. It's why we're building the YouTube pipeline that we're building, is so that I can do playouts at a higher quality than what WebRTC will solve. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Josh asks, when selecting a playout method, what considerations about your final destination and video path would be good to take into account?
Jonas, start us off.
It goes from like, what is the color space you need at the end? A lot of playout solutions don't support 10-bit HDR, PQ, or HLG yet. Do you need multiple audio channels? So like, hey, do you need 5 audio channels for surround? Do you need like 4 Two, like, do you need multiple tracks that are being encoded correctly so you can have multi-language? That's what I would keep into consideration. And then also frame rate. Check the frame rate. And then we haven't talked about weird resolutions yet. So like if it's not 16:9, that's also something to keep in mind if it's not a 16:9 playout.
Alex?
Yeah, and you want to do the best you can to find out who is going to watch it and what frame rate makes sense for them, because and try to do everything you can to deliver that output to the format that they're used to. So if you're gonna play something out or do something, when you push it out, if you're working with broadcast, they may still want 1080i. So you want to think about those kinds of issues before you hand it to them. What you don't want to do is leave somewhere down the path something else converting that you don't have control of. Figure out how you're going to do it so that you can test it and you can ensure the quality.
Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. And Tony asks, House of Worship is doing a play in theater. One actor will not be in the theater. His part will be a Zoom recording. Should I try to Playout Bee connected to the house sound system?
Well, that is one way to do it, I'm sure. There's a number of possibilities, and we know that you have a pretty complex system. So let's get some ideas. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it just depends on what the interface is. Most of the PlayoutBee hardware, whether it's a Raspberry Pi or up, is going to have a stereo out. So you're going to have to figure out how to turn that stereo out into a into something that you can use. So they'll split that out into RCA, convert it to XLR. The other thing to look at there is when you're using something that's a little bit a more robust piece of hardware, you might think about, depending on what kind of mixer is being used in the theater, can you convert it to Dante? Those kinds of things, so that you can send it out without having to go out to any analog devices.
Courtney?
One problem you're going to run into, and I ran into this a lot of times in doing playouts of a character on a video monitor, and when you're interfacing live actors on stage or on camera with a played out actor on tape or on video, timing is essential, and you don't want them delivering their line 3 seconds late or 2 seconds early. So you've got to have a playout system that can set bookmarks or at the beginning of each line, so that you can, if the timing is wrong, hold that video until the point where that line of the person on Zoom is supposed to come in and deliver his line. Then you hit the button and start playing it back right on cue. And then, then you have a next bookmark for his next line and so on. So you have to parcel out these lines to fit them into the live play, because the other actor's timing is not going to be the same every time they perform that play. Timing's going to be different. They may react to some, a laugh or something in the audience and pause the play for that. So trying to fit a pre-recorded character into a live situation can be quite problematic, and you need to work out how you're going to do that and how you're going to deal with the timing differences of a pre-recorded character and delivering the lines on cue.
Jonas?
And if you use something like a Raspberry Pi, what you can do is use two DI boxes or another form of isolator to get the mini jack into larger jacks into XLR. That's how we use it at our church. And like Courtney said, make sure to record a bunch of noddies, is how we call it, just nods. Have them stand there and nod, so at the tail end start. So if the other performers go long or you go short with the recording, you just have someone standing there and still reacting to the thing. That's what I would do.
Tony?
Yeah, this is all outside of my wheelhouse. I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm being asked to do things that is really stretching me. So the reason why all of this is taking place is that this is the one actor who is professional, and he can't be there in the theater, and so we're trying to figure out how to do this. So I was thinking that I would connect Playout Bee to play. The system is a Behringer system. That's at the theater, and I wanted to connect the Playout Bee to the Behringer system and then play out his portion of the video. He's playing JC, or Jesus Christ, for those who didn't know. And so it's at the end of the play, but there is actual dialogue from live actors that's going to take place at the same time, lines going back and forth between the recording and the live actors.
Tony, when the character finishes a line, is he on both some kind of playout screen as well as voice, or is this entirely audio? The reason I'm saying that is clearly if it freezes at the end of that and there's no continuation of exactly what Jonas was talking about, him nodding or understanding or being present, it's going to look a little odd.
Right. So the idea was that it was going to be video, but we might have to, because of all of the circumstances, we might have to make sure that it's all audio, and maybe have some kind of, as a God figure, maybe have some type of masking or something, and just people would see the image of not really seeing a person, but something showing, and just hear the audio.
Well, that theater is good at implying things as opposed to necessarily being realistic about it. So maybe, Courtney, you had some thoughts?
Sounds like you're doing Job, the play. I did that in high school, and I was the audio guy doing Job, and we had to play back all of God's lines. And what we did is we had a separate speaker up in the balcony of the theater, so the God voice would come out, and I had all of God's lines on tape. And so I would just play back, a linear tape, each line on cue as it would come out of the separate speaker. So since he didn't have to appear on camera, since he was God, it was a little easier. If you have to have him appear on camera, you might look at not having that person on screen or visible except when they're delivering a line. So if you're cutting this play with different cameras, you'd cut to him and play back his next line, etc. And then you could just line up all the lines in a sequential playout program that is designed to do a playlist of videos, and it would queue up the next line and be waiting for you to hit the button to play it back. And he delivers his line, and when you hit the button, it cuts to him. And you could do this with probably do this with Playout Bee and a playlist, and use the cues from the from your NATIM to cue the Playout Bee to start the line on cue when you cut to it. So that might be a way to do it.
I would save you a lot of hassle and just pre-record the end. Like pre-record not only that actor, but also the actors he's interacting with, and find a storyline reason why it needs to be that way. Like, I don't know, maybe it starts with 10 months later, or like throwback, or like making it look like it fits into the story that this is a different segment. But I would just try to do it all in one, like take that whole scene or part of the play, record it with all the actors already. So you have a one video you need to play out, so you don't need to hassle around and try to fit the lines. And yeah, I think that would give you a more consistent product at the end.
Lots of options. Definitely keep us up to date on what's happening and how it works out once you perform it. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. And John asks, what sort of Pi is needed for PlayoutBee? How does a person get started researching, finding, and purchasing one?
Well, right now you ask Jonas because he's here. Jonas.
So the Pi that most people use is the Raspberry Pi 4, so simple box. It's super hard to get a Pi right now. I'm trying to get a Raspberry Pi with 2 gigabytes of RAM, and it's surprisingly hard. There's this website called RP Locator that shows you all the Pis that are available, and this is like the worldwide stock right now. That's not for crazy scalper prices. Please don't pay 200 euros or US dollars or anything above $100 for a Pi. And you see there's just nothing right now. That's one of the reasons why we shifted so heavily into other devices as well. So you can use an old Mac Mini, you can use an old Intel NUC. Those should also work well.
Supply and demand classic. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Dave Kaufman in Vancouver, British Columbia. And Dave asks, I'd like to use POB on PlayoutBee on the Pi since I have too many laptops on the desk, but I'm worried that I will order the wrong one. Can I buy a Pi with it installed?
Jonas, do you have systems that you sell?
No, we don't have a Pi system that we sell at the moment. And you see the Pi, it's just a supply issue right now. We hope that this year it's going to open up and there's going to be more Pis that lets you even think about selling it. But right now we can't even get a single one. So yeah, probably not the platform we would develop hardware on right now.
Next question. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a last minute hand. Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask Jonas. I have tried, I don't think I've tried the Windows version of Playout Bee on these stick PCs. That might be a good lower cost alternative. You can get these for about $100, $125. And the web-based interface should work on it. And that might be a solution for you if you can't find any Raspberry Pis.
And Jonas, do those work there on those little?
I haven't tried the stick PCs, but most, like I said, if you can open up YouTube, that's a good.
Yeah, it's quad core. It has
fine.
Intel chipset. It's much more powerful than a Raspberry Pi, so it should play it back fine.
Which
play
one
back
is that?
up to 9. This is a MeLE stick PC. Which
How do you spell MeLE?
MELE.
Okay, just want to make sure it wasn't
MELE.
MeLE.
And they also make a new one, which I just got in 2 different versions for the 5105 and the 4125 processor. And this one has 2 HDMI outs, so it could power 2 monitors, and it's also got gigabit Ethernet and USB 3 and everything else on it. So it works quite well and can handle 2 high-def playbacks simultaneous. 2 4K playbacks simultaneously at 60 frames per second.
Okay, learning new solutions all the time. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. For low-budget situations where you don't have dedicated audio and video people, could PlayoutBee be a solution to playing out content via MIDI from a audio console?
Jonas, have you attached MIDI into this?
PlayoutBee doesn't have a MIDI input. What you could try is use Companion or anything that can work as a protocol translator and use that to trigger PlayoutBee commands. But yeah, PlayoutBee is really integratable. It has an open API. If there is anything missing in the API, I'm more than welcome to add more things, like the document isn't released yet with the new API, but there's everything in there from like incremental increases of volume, audio, and all that. You can change all the clips, volume, in points, out points, all that over the API, so you can interface it to whatever you want to interface it with.
Nice. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Chris Irving in Asheville. And Chris asks, I've had issues with high-resolution live event LED video wall playout losing sync across multiple 4K rasters, causing tearing. We've only ever gotten good sync from a single 4K raster. Looking for a rock-solid solution for native res playback.
So you're trying to do a lot of big rasters. Alex?
Yeah, there are specialized pieces of hardware and software that you start getting into. So what you want is, in the old days, we would say it was Spider. A lot of times now we're using Disguise is another one that's pretty popular. Resolume is another one that you want to look at. Resolume Arena, and what you're looking at here is these are systems that are designed to go out on multiple projectors across large LED walls, and they're allowing you to map map the videos over top of each other or butt them up against each other, but also play those out. You should be able to do it with things like QLab as well. Should be able to do that at a level of frame accuracy, and I believe that Isadora could do some of those things as well. So those are a variety of different options that you have there, but you're looking for something that is not just a playout system, but really a system that's designed to put out multiple videos at the same time, and it's part of the whether it's Isadora or Resolume or Disguise, you're going to need something that's really designed for multi-screen or large format playout.
And I note in your question, you say native res playback, and I guess in part that would be affected by what the native resolution is. If you have a whole bunch of 4K things that you need to play out, you're going to have much more trouble than if you have a whole bunch of H.264 encoded 1920 by 1080s.
Yeah, typically this gets back into really paying attention. This is where we stop using H.264 typically as soon as because that long GOP becomes a real problem when you start to tie all those things back together. So you definitely want to. This is a pretty specialized solution, and you're going to look for things that are specialized for that multi-screen playout. But you want to really think about those things. The other thing you have to think about in all of these playouts also is, what are you playing out to and who's going to watch it? One of the things that we've pushed for a long time is really thinking about 16:9 experiences that are sitting on a long screen, so that because the problem you get yourself into is when you build for the audience that's in the room, this is just another playout problem that kind of extending, but when you build for the audience in the room, you have a problem with the audience online. How are they going to see what you're doing? And then you end up cutting and giving them a really bad experience of this 32:9 or 64:9 image. And the problem is that was fine when there was 15,000 people in the room and 300 people watching live. But as now that there's 15,000 online and 100 in the room, or 100,000 online and 1,000 in the room, you really have to build your playout and presentation for the online audience. And when you do that, you're now moving to, typically you're trying to have your main playout system be supporting the content that you can watch really needs to sit in that 16:9 format. And then you fake it by having it appear in different parts of a long LED wall, but it's something else to consider as well.
Courtney, you had a last thought?
Yeah, you're looking for something that has a single machine with multiple video cards so they can map this single 4K raster playback across the video of those 4 cards simultaneously. And those 4 cards being in the same box will be in sync with each other. And so you won't get the sync issues because they'll all be tied to same vertical sync, will be all tied together. And then the program can map that 4K video across those 4K video, the raster of those 4 4K video outputs, or 3 or 4, how many are you using, to blow it up to a larger size.
Alex, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, and a lot of times we don't need to have multiple cards. We can have one card with multiple outputs as well. And it's a lot of times easier. We have the card. It's why you see sometimes these quad cards and duo cards, is so that we can push a lot of things out all at one time.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. And Robert asks, what's the best under $500 hardware-based solution that can play back 422HQ and H.264 into a stream?
Jeffrey Power is going to start us off. Jeffrey?
Well, you can do something like a Nook or something like that, but you need to have a high-end graphics card, and of course, using something like Playout Bee or VLC. But I would highly recommend to check out the M1s that are now used and on sale. Like for instance, you can go to OWC right now and go to their used section, and you'll see a base one for under $500. And of course, you can upgrade to whatever you want. You'll have to put in more hard drive space if you decide to, if you need more space, of course. But that's where I would go.
Alex.
And the big question there will be, when you say 422HQ, the primary reason that you would do HQ on a playback would be to get 10-bit. And once you own a 10-bit, you're in a whole different world there's almost nothing that plays that out. So you have to be really careful of what that looks like. I would say an educational version of an M1 or M2 now, or a used one, both of those would do because 422 is HQ, so you're eliminating anything that doesn't play out a ProRes file. But you're really looking at the 10-bit if you are looking at that, now you're talking about Softron, which is a lot more. The hardware is cheap, software is more expensive.
Jonas?
If you actually want poly hardware, there is the HyperDeck shuttle that, depending on where you buy it, should be just below $500. It can play out H.264 if you use the specific H.264 variant that it wants with the specific profile. They also just upgraded that to have a web interface to upload and download clips from, or you can use the HyperDeck Studio HD Mini. That should also be just under $500 US, and that also can do H.264 and ProRes. Those are the 2 hardware options under $500 if you don't want to deal with a computer.
Courtney?
And like I talked earlier, if you do want to deal with the computer, these little Windows PCs from MeLE, this one's $35 off of $219, so it's under $200 for this MeLE Quieter 2. which comes with 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs, and a full Windows Pro 4, so it'll run any Windows playback software on it. And you can get codecs that'll play 422HQ. I'm not sure whether it'll play it back. It depends on whether they're optimized for acceleration using the GPU. If it is, then it can play it back. If it isn't, then I wouldn't try and play back 422HQ. You'd be much better off with H.264 or HEVC codecs for 4K if you want to play 4K.
Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Josh asks, when constructing an edit inside the event from an NLE, a time-saving technique is to play out an end of broadcast summary directly from the NLE. When is this a viable solution, and when might you wish to move to a dedicated playout device or program?
Jonas?
It really depends on the format that you use. So let's say you have a really high quality format, then you might struggle to find a system that can play it out live, but that's also where something like an EVS comes in, where you can top and tail and put inserts from a growing file into a playout, or you would go down the growing file route and hope that the last 10 minutes isn't important and you render it out at that point. Or vMix replay is also one that we've used to create highlights of an event. Every time someone says how great the event is, we clip it in vMix replay, and then you can play out that list. So replay systems are also good for this.
Alex?
Yeah, every time you attach all your files together, it becomes harder to deal with them. So a lot of times we do try to get people to send us things in pieces, send us this so that we can stop, start, insert, move around. I mean, obviously you want the whole piece to be there, but if you have some other piece, a lot of times it's easier if you just give us 2 separate pieces so that we can always attach them to each other and let them play through. But if we don't, we want to be able to have that flexibility.
Yeah, some of those high-end systems, Softron and other things, they're working with growing files, but you can get access to them even while they're growing and grab pieces to start assembling highlight reels. That's kind of what they do in sports broadcasts and other things, kind of at the high end. They have those kind of capabilities. Let's dive to the next question.
Next question is from Samuel Nordvik in Norway. And Samuel says, I use vMix for video playback to screens in the room and live stream simultaneously, and it works very well for my needs.
Good. We talked about vMix being one of the possible solutions. It's great, Samuel, to hear from you that you're having success with it. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What is a good quote-unquote torture test for a playout system? What back-to-back reaction time and ambient temperature conditions should be taken into account?
Yeah. Alex, talk to us about performance and
so I have a file, or I have a couple files, and we should probably make them. I don't have any proprietary nature to them, but I just use them. We've compiled some things that we use to test to send out, and we some of them are what we call Widowmaker shots, where they will not compress well, and so we know that. So what I do is I like to take pictures of the ocean. Since I live in California near the beach, I have 12K and multiple frame rates of just the ocean rolling in with reflections and everything else. And I know that won't ever stream out well. So it's not a matter of, but I know where it should be for most things. So where does that play out? So one of the things I do is I have a couple of those things. I have a fan, or it was a little wind thing that they go 2 different directions, because it means that you can't do any predictive motion blur. So there's 2 fans that are going in 2 different directions when the wind hits it. And it's a very hard thing to compress. So I have that. I have the ocean. Then I have channel checkers. So I do a lot of stuff in 5.1. So it'll be left channel, right channel, center, LFE, or actually LFE is, so you have these different things that are there that tell you where those things are. I then run a sync check. So I have things that are gonna hit at a certain sync so that you're in sync. I have, we do tone to make sure that it's a clean signal, and we know where the levels should be. So there's a variety of different. Oftentimes, some of ours have some version of pink noise, that we add, and it depends on what those things are. So there's a couple different playouts that we do that are checking the channels, checking the sync, checking the ability to compress, and this is testing the whole system. Oftentimes we're going from one location out to many locations, even if it's not streamed. And we want to make sure it gets all the way out to the end product. And you can find a lot of things that are wrong, channel order problems, quality issues. All of those things are things that we work on.
All right. We've had a fabulous discussion today. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Don't forget that tomorrow...
We have a couple more questions. I don't want to... Okay. We don't need to...
Okay.
I had an answer on the previous question, but it just went away. But,
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
that I use...
Let's go to the next question.
Oh.
Next, go ahead, Courtney, before.
I was just going to say that I use for torture testing of the little PCs I was just showing is something that looks like this, which is screen capture of, first-person shooter video games. So the perspective is changing on 9 different images simultaneously. And you can see here that the zoom encoder can hardly handle it, but it's running full frame on the little stick PC that this is running on. It's running 9 high-def videos simultaneously. And I let this run 24/7 and see if the processor that's playing it back overheats. And then if it does, it'll start to throttle, and you'll see them start to drop frames and lose frames or break up. And so something like that is what I use to torture test those little PCs to make sure that they can handle it without throttling the video after they get hot, which is a consideration you have to take into account.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Peter Belbin in Houston. Are there any cases where there's a strong preference towards being able to play out directly via SDI versus HDMI being converted to SDI? Does the factor largely on the playout choices?
Jonas.
Yeah, so every time we try to do key fill, that's where you largely want to end up in an SDI native format, just because then it's really important that you have the 2 synced sources, the key and the fill source. For example, there are a lot of tools that do it native. There are not a lot of tools that do it natively. Key fill is still a little bit hard to get. There's the higher end ones. If you use Playout Bee, you can use Casper CG, vMix, or OBS to take the browser output from Playout Bee into it. And then you can use the transparencies from within the video file. We just hand them through OBS, vMix, and Casper CG and have like really nice key fill. That's what I've used. But yeah, definitely it will affect your choices of what playout system can do it. Then also keep in mind if it needs to be multiplied, that's why we don't have a native SDI output. That's pretty hard in all the different SDKs. But vMix does a great job at converting Playout Bee's transparency into like pre-multiplied for the ATEM and all that.
Alex.
Yeah, and SDI will be more limited in the number of resolutions and frame rates that you have access to. It's within those SDI, the SMPTE SDI formats. But it also, if you're using a Mac, and depending on the software, you may have the infamous orange or yellow dot that will come out of all your HDMI, where it will not do that on an SDI output.
Let's go to the last question.
Last question is from Douglas Carmichael. Courtney, the MeLE PCs look appealing for many applications. Do you know of any mini PCs with serial consoles for server network use cases?
And nobody has raised a hand on this one. Courtney, what do you think?
I'm not sure what you mean by serial consoles. They do have, all of those do have gigabit Ethernet built into them. You could control them over a serial console or command window in Windows. They all come with Windows 11 Pro, so you can also use remote control over the Windows remote to get into each one of them and run them remotely. So you can run them headless in that fashion, since they are Windows 11 Pro. So you do have access to use them with servers and access them remotely as well.
Cool. Thank you all. Another show in the can. Don't forget tomorrow, Friday's show, we're going to be talking about the $1,000 studio. So if you want to build something to do something like we do on Office Hours, what would you do? What would your choices be if you were constrained to a $1,000 budget? Alex, what were you thinking? What was your thinking about this?
A lot of people are building stuff, whether it's personal studios, professional home YouTube studios, corporate studios, mainline studios, and those range from $1,000 or maybe less all the way up to millions of dollars. And we're not going to go to the millions of dollars area, but we'll probably go all the way up over the year, maybe once every couple months. We will go up to about $250,000. So just talking about what do you start adding when you get into this number, where do you start going, oh, now we need a bigger router. Now we need a bigger whatever. So we just understand what the range is. Under 1,000 is constraining to get the real high quality. But what does that take? Do we use web cameras? Do we use regular cameras? Where do we make those priorities and where do we make those choices? So you'll see us ratcheting this up over the year. And I think it really lets us talk through a lot of the different options at different prices.
Nice. Don't forget a special thing Saturday coming up in 2 days, April 1st, 1800 Zulu, 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We are going to have a volunteer orientation. Alex is going to come and help those of you who are interested in becoming volunteers, either in the back end or maybe as a potential panelist, whatever you want to do. Alex is going to have a meeting here on office hours to kind of help you get oriented.
It's me and the team. So we'll be talking about that. And, if you have any questions about it, I mean, volunteering and being part of these teams is a great way to meet a lot of people. It's a great way to learn a lot of things that are there. We've got some pretty interesting people joining the teams right now. And so there's a great way to cross-pollinate between different skill sets. And so, and you don't have to be just working on the show. There's development teams. There's people working on just the organization of all these shows. There's people we're looking for people that want to do research, that want to do all kinds of other bits and pieces. So there's a lot of different things that are both a lot of hours, not very many hours, more vertical, less vertical. So if you're interested in figuring out what those are, join us on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
And one of the most active groups right now is our NAB team. The actual volunteer crew, I think, is pretty much set by now, but there will be a lot of other things. So if you're interested in that, hang out in office hours and check the website constantly. Last but certainly not least, our profound thank you to everybody who helps put this show on every single day. Our amazing panelist experts. It was a great panel today. Thank you all for your expertise. It was really great to be able to explore this subject and get really good advice. Our producers, those of you who are viewing and who drive the show content with your questions and your votes on all of those questions, it's a critical part of what we do here every day because we want to talk about what you are interested in, and you affect that through your voting. And our amazing behind-the-scenes crew. This is truly a global operation, and the production team is literally spread out everywhere in the world and come together to do this for you. Without them, this would not be possible. Final word, After Hours always open for your questions or comments 24/7. We will be back tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Roll credits. Great to have you here, Jonas. Thank you all for your expertise today.